I'd like to call the Gurnee Village Board regular meeting of July 20th, 2020 to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Present.
Present.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First item tonight is approval of the consent agenda as presented. Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please, Andy.
Yes.
Yes. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Patrick, please read the consent agenda into the record.
Item number 1, approval of the minutes from the July 6, 2020 Village Board meeting. Item number 2, approval of ordinance 2020-47, approving an agreement for use of right-of-way between the Village of Gurnee and Kelso Burnett Company. Item number 3, approval of a request from the Police Department to purchase a 2020 Chevrolet Equinox LS from Ray Chevrolet at a cost of $24,957. Item number 4, approval of request to set bid date of August 10, 2020 for Bittersweet Golf Course Clubhouse Roof Replacement Project. Item number 5, approval of payroll for period ending July 3, 2020 in the amount of $872,725.98. Item number 6, approval of bills for period ending July 20, 2020 in the amount of $1,074,177.03.
Thank you, Patrick. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by trustee
Second.
Garner, second by trustee O'Brien. Roll call, please, Andy.
Yes.
Yes. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Petitions and communications. First is a proclamation for National Stop on Red Week from August 2nd through 8th, 2020. For the sake of brevity, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by trustee O'Brien, second by trustee Garner. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, the proclamation carries. All right, we have reports. This one we have been eagerly anticipating. So Brian, give it to us.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to walk through the report that was included in the materials and focus, kind of narrow the focus a little bit financially rather than go through all the material. But first, looking at the expected duration of our fiscal emergency. Right now, we're currently in Phase 4 of the Restore Illinois plan. There is a Phase 5, but that requires a vaccine or highly effective treatment. So we will likely be in Phase 4 for the foreseeable future, at least. One thing that did change with the Restore Illinois plan was they updated the regions. Lake County and McHenry County are now grouped together. So that it kind of narrows the area in which we're lumped in with, and also the metrics will focus on those two, on that region now, but those two counties. Looking at the status of the big three, Six Flags Hurricane Harbor open today to pass holders, and next week to the general public.
Just the water park.
Just the water park.
This is a water park, and I was told they had 1,600 spots, and all of them were reserved and filled today, so that's a good sign.
On the amusement park portion is still out there as a question mark. Gurnee Mills has been open with some restrictions, food court, gathering areas, things like that. Everything we've heard anecdotally and, through going out there myself, looks very positive. There's been quite crowds out there, and parking lots are full, so that's definitely a positive sign. Great Wolf Lodge has the Navy contract through the middle of August, and then it looks like on August 16th, they've committed to opening about half to the general public. So we'll see how that goes. Starting with the fund balance, and I'm going to focus mainly on the general fund here for most of it. And in the report, there's 3 scenarios where we look at versus last year, versus a seasonally adjusted budget, and then versus the straight line budget. I'm going to focus strictly on this year versus last year, kind of keep it so we're not all over the place looking at 3 different sets of numbers. But Looking at general fund balance specifically, last year through June, we used $24,235. This year through June, we've used just over 1.12 million. Leaves us with a net year-over-year usage of 1.1 million. So through 2 months, we've used 1.1 million more of fund balance than we did last year. Now, it's kind of hard to see that red on there, but it says 1.1 million. Couple notes here, it only includes the March sales tax because July is the April sales tax, so we still only have included in these numbers a regular month, so to speak, and then 1 month where it was down a third. So also in here, we see the numbers in May are negative. That's because we have the big insurance premium payment in May, so we typically dip into fund balance in May anyway. Building on that, looking at revenues, through June last year, we collected almost 7.7 million. Through this year, we collected 5.6 million. That leaves us with a net, I don't want to say loss, but deficit from last year at least of just over 2 million, or about 26.8%. So overall general fund revenues through the same time period last year are down just over $2 million. Where does that $2 million come from? Looking at the big four, so this is sales tax, which it has two pieces to it, amusement tax, hotel, and food and beverage. Last year through June, collected almost 3.7 million. This year we collected about 2.6. So the big four accounts for just over $1 million of that $2 million deficit, down $1,033,111, or about 28%. Again, just note, this includes March sales tax, doesn't include the April numbers, which we know were down up 42% versus what we saw in March, the 21.5%. 2 full months of impact, and everything else but sales tax is included in here because there's not a lag. It's just a 1-month lag versus a 3-month lag for sales tax. So we see those are true impacted numbers. Amusement tax is the hardest hit, down 72, just over 72%, followed by hotel tax, almost 70%, and food and beverage, just over 52%. So obviously some severe impacts to those three, and sales tax is going to get worse for the next couple months.
Brian, do those three include June receipts?
So this is May and June receipts for the activity
all right.
in April and May.
Oh, April, okay, so
Yeah.
we don't really know what June looks like yet. June revenue coming in.
We don't, not yet, at least not as of this report.
Are the movie theaters open yet?
So far, they have,
I don't know if movie theater's open or
I haven't seen Marcus, I don't think they're open yet.
Parking lot's empty.
I know from an amusement tax standpoint, there's nothing being generated, so.
I thought they could open at state.
No,
phase 4.
However, there's not any new releases of movies coming out, so there's nothing to move.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
So of our $2 million revenue deficit, $1 million comes from the big four. Looking at other revenues that we identify here that are impacted by COVID or largely impacted by COVID, those are down about $517,000, or about 36.4%. Some of this is some of the income tax deficit, about $300,000 of that. $500,000 is timing. We got an extra payment last year because the state was playing catch up, so we actually got 2 payments in 1 month. So it's a little bit better than what it looks like here. We do see in July, we do see a bounce back for fines. Obviously, as activity moves through the community, there's a difference. There's things going on. Generates charges for service, fines, things like that. And then in the other revenues, down at the bottom, this is everything else. So it's not the big four, it's not the other stuff that we've identified here. It's everything else in the general fund. That's down another $500,000 as well, or about 20%. A good chunk of that is the delay in receipts for road and bridge tax. As you know, the county allowed people to pay their property taxes late. That obviously filters down to the local level here. So those will ramp up as those come in. So general fund balance, just tying it all together here. Total revenues, again, down $2 million. We saw half of that from big four, half of it from everything else. On the expenditure side, we were actually almost $1 million to the good, which gets us to the 1.1 million use of fund balance for May and June, through June 30, I should say. So we know what's coming. What is the village doing about it? We had the first budget amendment, eliminated the capital transfer and reduced the economic development reserve. We have personnel adjustment that everybody's aware of, freezing positions, COLAs, things like that. And we basically have the departments on an essential spending only plan, so, we should see not only the 3 million we planned and we identified as cost measures, cost reduction measures, but additional on top of that as well. So outlook, I don't want to say it's a prediction. We'll call it an outlook. In the beginning of this year, it's unaudited, but in the beginning of this year, we should have a fund balance around 27 million, and the general fund are about 62%. Everything I'm seeing right now, assuming we stay on the same track of reopening, we don't have another shutdown, kind of continue the curve up, that 25% of revenue impact number seems logical. Comes to about $10 million in the general fund. We've already identified 3 million in expenditure reductions through conservative budgeting and other things that could come from, essential spending only. That could be anywhere from 3 to 5 million. That would leave us with a net use of fund balance of anywhere between 5 and 7 million, again, at this point. Would leave us with an ending fund balance at the end of the year if all that played out, which I'm sure it'll change. It's almost guaranteed to change. But that would leave us with an ending fund balance somewhere between 20 and 22 million, or say roughly 45 to 50% of revenues, budgeted revenues. Takes us almost exactly back to 2009 levels. So we'll end in the same place we started the last, fiscal crisis, which the village weathered pretty good and fund balance stayed pretty much flat for 4 years as we worked through that, so. Again, a lot of assumptions, staying on the path, no other shutdowns. This looks like it is definitely in the range. And it's consistent with what other communities are seeing as well. So that's my last slide on the general fund. Any questions on that before I move to a couple other things?
Questions from the trustees? 10 years wiped out in 4 months.
One just important thing to remember, when you see 25%, that 10 million is 25% of all revenues. So it's a fairly conservative number because we have things like contractual agreements that aren't going to be down at all included in there. So there's a little bit of leeway for the things like the big four could be more than 25% down and we still end up 25% total. So I just wanted to make sure to point that piece out. Water and sewer fund, we're still seeing water sales down 20%. That equates to about 1.5 million. We've already delayed capital. We've used the IEPA loan, additional 400,000. And we still have the additional principal that we budgeted for the IEPA loan of 250,000 out there. It's not due till November, so we can make decisions then. But at this point, it looks like that's something that we could definitely put off. Impact in the capital improvement fund. Obviously, we use home rule sales tax for the majority of that. If that's down 25%, which on the home rule side will likely be more than that, but that's about 1.2 million, but we've delayed enough capital and utilized MFT money to offset the road program to cover that and then some. So we're in a good position there. Again, I say delayed because if we get to the end of the year, we can still make those capital purchases out of this year's budget if we end up better than we thought. And that's the update. So happy to take any questions on. And then again, just focusing on last year versus this year rather than getting into different scenarios. I think that's the easiest way to look at where we're at and gauge the scope of our problem.
Opportunity.
There you go, opportunity.
Questions from the trustees? I think it's really August when we'll feel like we'll know whether we're coming out of it or, because again, there's a lot of people unemployed, and as long as people are unemployed or conserving cash, they're not spending money, and if they're not spending money, that hits us. So even if everything reopens, if people don't feel safe shopping or they choose to conserve cash, which is not unusual and is a kind of a wise thing to do right now, the less spending, the bigger hit we take. So September maybe before we kind of see consumer perception, consumer attitudes start being reflected.
I would say the results from April activity that we received in July sales tax was actually a lot better than
Yeah,
we had anticipated. It was only down 42%.
yeah.
That sounds like a huge number, but you got to remember, April was the first month of
Yeah.
everything shut down. It was like ghost town.
Yeah,
You know, nobody came
we were
out.
all pleasantly surprised.
So, then activity started to pick up a little bit. So if that's the floor, I think we could be fairly pleased with that.
All right. Thank you, Brian. I know you and Pat monitor this every single day and update everything. I appreciate that. And that's really the only way we'll get through it, is to look at every penny every day. Is it essential? Is it not? And go from there. And we still may have to make some decisions later this year. All right. No other reports?
No, just a heads up, we will have a committee of the whole meeting next week. So the red light camera contract is up for your consideration for renewal. So Chief Smith is going to be here to go over that as far as the statistics and how that's been working. And then also we'll have Brett Fritzler, Nick Leach, and Brian to talk about the Knowles Road Water Tower, Pressure Zone 5, the loan, and just an update on that, how that's going. So we'll have two topics for discussion next Monday.
And the water tower looks great. The logo. Doesn't everybody love it?
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's
I drove
almost
by
full.
just to see it.
The only thing better would have been purple. All right, no other old business?
Correct.
Okay, then new business. Item number 1, approval of ordinance 2020-48, amending the Gurnee Municipal Code to classify the intersection of Granville Avenue and Ferndale Street as a stop intersection. Pat?
Yes, so we're going back to where we started with Ferndale and Granville, at least that's what we're recommending. Back in 2013, we experimented and installed a mini roundabout at this intersection. So those that have been through it saw it was raised up in the middle, mountable center in the intersection. We looked at this as a attempt to try to cut down on the speed of traffic cutting through from 41 down to Grand Avenue. Didn't quite function as we thought it would after all these years, still getting complaints from the residents, still have people either driving up over it or going around and going off on the edge of the road into people's yards. Also, it's difficult in the wintertime for Public Works to plow. So with the reconstruction of Ferndale Avenue, engineering took a look at this and is recommending that we go back to, like I said, where we were before. So you would have stop signs on Granville, and then Ferndale would not have stop signs. This is what it was prior to 2013. We will increase some of the signage in that area as far as the speed limit signage to try to slow people down, and then an increased police presence. But as I said, the mini roundabout just hasn't functioned as we had hoped it would. So we're going to take this opportunity and put it back to the way it was.
So if they continue to complain about cut-through traffic, our only other option would be to go back to IDOT and see if they'd make Ferndale right in, right out from 41. Residents did not want that before, but they didn't want cut-through traffic. So if the complaints continue, that's really the only option, whether they like that or not. So, but yeah, the mini roundabout did not work.
And hopefully when they get 132 and 41 back open too. I mean, there's a lot of cut-through traffic going through there now because that intersection's under construction, so they're making progress out there again. And when they get that open back up, hopefully that'll cut down on the traffic volume through there.
Lynn, just out of curiosity, you're only putting the stop signs on Granville? You're not putting it on Ferndale itself to
That's how it was originally.
slow down the,
That's how it was originally. And it doesn't warrant a four-way stop?
I know, but if you're complaining about, that's like a direct shot through then without any stops.
So the standards for signage for stop signs, the heavier traveled route should get the throughway. The, minor traveled streets get the stop signs. In order to justify a four-way stop, it is based upon delays and access onto the main road. It's not based upon the speed of the through traffic. So there's not enough volume coming in from the side streets to warrant a four-way stop. We looked at that, and there's no issues with, being able to access it or sight lines or anything along those lines.
Okay.
Just need people to be a little more responsible, and then it would work itself out.
You're in a comedic mood tonight, is
Think
that?
how much less government we would have if everybody
Yes,
was
that
responsible.
Would be where I'd be happy with, but.
All right, if there's no other questions, do I have a motion to approve?
So
Motion
moved.
by trustee Ross, second by trustee Balmas. Roll call, please, Andy.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Item number 2, approval of ordinance 2020-49, authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the County of Lake pertaining to COVID-19 relief funds.
Sheriff Bryan has been intimately involved in this on a lot of conference calls. He's the one that's gathering up all the information, so he's going to walk us through this quick.
So as part of the CARES Act, the county was allocated $122 million to offset, obviously, the cost of the pandemic. They have chose to allocate an initial $10 million of that to municipalities and fire districts, dividing that up, $9 million for municipalities, $1 million for fire districts, to offset the costs of any PPE that we had to purchase, sanitizing buildings, teleworking costs, so this would be like licensing costs for Zoom and WebEx and things like that, that Chris's team had to take on, and then any communication costs we had with, getting information out there and things like that. There's also, included in here is certain personnel costs, so I should say that, I don't want to say the slam dunk ones, but the ones that seem the easiest are, fire department calls for service that are COVID related, we can get reimbursed for that. There's still some question and pending guidance on, if people had to take off work for symptoms or things like that, or look after somebody else. There's still some outstanding questions there, but certain personnel costs are reimbursable. The first deadline for submission is July 31st, so we found out about this last week. Municipalities are scrambling to get at least first round of submissions together in the next couple weeks. And then there'll be another round tentatively end of September or maybe October for another submission. And to get through all that process, the county put together an IGA, which just kind of lays out each party's responsibilities and some timelines and who's going to do what and what happens if, the costs aren't eligible and things like that. So they're asking each municipality that is going to submit for reimbursement to execute the IGA, and they will not reimburse without an executed IGA. So I'd like to say we have choice, but if we want to submit for reimbursement, we have to sign the IGA.
Brian, you looked at the IGA? Okay.
Yeah, it was definitely, and they had circulated a draft around, kind of to the finance community to take a look at it and guidelines and things like that. So there was plenty of feedback on that. So this was definitely a process that they had hired a consultant to set some of that forward, but also asked for input too from municipalities. So that was, at least we had some hand in shaping it, or at least providing feedback.
Since we cover the Warren Waukegan Fire District, can we get their slice of the pie?
We would submit for them, correct?
God, you are so good. I love it when everybody's like so far ahead on it.
That's the guidance right now. It could change, because one thing that the county said is they're getting constant updates from Treasury on what's eligible and guidelines about what's eligible, so I wouldn't be surprised if the guidelines change weekly.
No, but at least I'm glad you guys are considering everything that we may have had to expend here. Oh, I'm sorry, I put my mask back on. I have my mask off because you can't hear me on the microphone when my mask is on. Trustee Thornton?
So does the teleworking, I think you might have answered my question already, but just to be clear, you said something about costs that may or may not be covered. And when I think of teleworking costs and thinking of the other businesses, they have some hardware costs to cover bandwidth, possibly some routers and hardware, so does all of that get included?
Yeah, so this would include those things for when we set up the WebEx, Zoom, those kind of items, as well as when we separated dispatch. So remember, we moved part of dispatch downstairs too. All the costs for that setup, and, you know, there were some consultants that came in, all that cost will be reimbursable as well. That's all included in that teleworking
Great,
section.
thanks.
As they say, any cost to separate employees and allow them to work remotely, so.
Every little bit's going to help here.
Our reimbursement as of now should be just north of 100,000, as of what we have right now. You know, obviously there's more stuff coming in, and if the guidelines change, that'll be, but I would expect our first submission to be near 100,000.
That's good. I mean, just be able to keep track of all that and find it and account for it and reconcile it. I mean, that's, says you have a good system.
And as of Friday, the guidelines changed to allow us to add another 50,000 to what I had originally anticipated, so who knows, we may end up getting more than that if they loosen the guidelines a little bit more.
Yeah, as soon as this whole COVID thing started, Brian set up special codes in our financial software to tag those, so it would all be ready to go. We've been through enough floods and snowstorms and that stuff that we know if there's gonna be expenses that weren't budgeted for, that there may be any chance of reimbursement, to flag those in the system versus having to go back and chase them after the fact. So we've gotten pretty good at that, which helps makes his life a little bit easier trying to gather all this up, so.
No, that's smart, because I can imagine there's a lot of communities that are just scrambling, trying to even find receipts, so.
Sure.
Trustee O'Brien?
I was just curious, does that also include things like the Gurnee to-go signs that we had for the restaurants since they had shut down due to COVID?
Anything that, we purchased for communication, as long as the village purchased it, it would be included in that. And I believe those are already coded to the thing Pat was just talking about. We have a separate line in them, so those were already coded and expense there. So everything in that account, I'll seek reimbursement for.
Fantastic.
Trustee Garner?
And once you submit application, can you amend it if changes continue to occur?
Yeah, so they communicated that there will be a review process from the consultant that the county finance department has hired and the county finance department, and they will come back to you if they need more information. So it won't be just a simple reject, you didn't check a box or something like that. There will be some interaction there based on either they need more information or reasons why something wasn't, was rejected. So it sounded like it's gonna be a pretty hands-on reimbursement process.
Well, as Brian said, this is probably just round one. I mean, the costs incurred that they're looking for go through the end of the year, through December 2020, so we haven't incurred those costs yet. So, I mean, I would imagine they'd come back with another second or third that's either due in February or March, depending on what this first one looks like.
Yeah,
and
they
what funds are
have
left over.
the initial 10 million, which the 9 million for municipalities and the million for fire districts is approved by the county already. They have another 10 million, I call it earmarked or whatever, in their list of, expenses that they're gonna spend this money on. Kind of allocated to municipalities if needed, then they would approve that and come back and allocate another 10 million eligible for reimbursement of this. So it's a good chunk of money that they've offered to municipalities, actually. So I don't know that in total, it doesn't sound like, at least from the group that meets regularly, that we probably won't use the first 10 million, so, because the guidelines are so strict. If those loosen, then obviously the other 10 million might come into play.
And the guidelines as they stand in the CARES Act does not give reimbursement for lost revenue, lost income.
No revenue included in this one.
But I think in the next bill that Congress is contemplating, because I wrote some letters as part of the U.S. Mayor's Conference, they've asked for that in there for lost revenue because of what we're going through, sales tax and all that. Every city and county across the United States has lost sales tax, so I think if it gets passed, there might be an opportunity for us to recoup some of our sales tax, if it passes, as is, and doesn't get vetoed. So but staff, myself, we're watching for every opportunity to either lobby for legislation or get help, to help get us through this, so. All right, if there's no other questions,
Motion approved.
motion by trustee
Second.
Bowman, second by trustee O'Brien. Roll call, please, Andy.
Yes.
Yes. Aye.
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 All right, motion carries. Item number 3, confirmation of emergency situation and execution of a contract with J.A. Johnson Paving for emergency roadway repair on Ravinia Drive in the amount of $21,999.50 under Village of Gurnee purchasing policy.
Sure. So you had a memo from our village engineer, Heather Glan, and then you also had an email from me last week. We had a pretty significant main break on July 8th on Ravinia Drive, 920 Ravinia Drive, by the park there. 12-inch ductile iron pipe. Once Public Works got it excavated, they found a softball-sized hole in the pipe, which they were able to repair and get the water back on. But when it was running before we got the valve shut up, it did cause some pretty significant damage to the roadway. Sinkholes on one side, heaved the pavement on the other side, and also impacted the one driveway approach at 920 Ravinia. So J.A. Johnson is our street reconstruction contractor in town working over on Ferndale. We got them over there to take a look at it, as we deemed it was a hazard for the motoring public. Gave us a quote of just under $22,000. Given that it was a hazard, I felt it was an emergency situation. My level of authorization for the purchasing policy is only $20,000 unless it is considered an emergency situation. So we executed that contract. They actually got out there on the following day, July 14th, and were able to dig out that 75-foot section curb to curb, new stone, asphalt, get that repaired and opened back up to the public. So actually a pretty quick fix. However, since it is over my authority, it needs village board concurrence that an emergency situation existed, and then authorization to pay this invoice. So luckily, as I said, Public Works got the repair fixed pretty quick, and we got J.A. Johnson out there to repair the road pretty quick. So as part of the process was filling up the new water tower, we expected a couple main breaks on the west side. We've had 4 to date. Public Works has been able to get them all repaired pretty timely fashion. Those 4 mains only affected 72 customers, so not too bad. It's been quiet since since last week, so quiet over the weekend, nothing today. So they're gonna slowly start putting a little more water in the tower. They've got about 4 or 5 more pounds of pressure that they need to get the tower completely full, so we're slowly cranking it up and keeping our fingers crossed so we don't have any additional main breaks, but this wasn't completely unexpected, so.
All right, do I have a motion from the board? We're in concurrence and pay the invoice. Motion from trustee Garner, second by trustee Ross. Roll call, please, Andy.
Yes.
Yes. Aye.
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 All right, we have no other business, we have no public. I do, in honor of David's birthday, though, have a St. Louis Cardinals face mask that I don't know that I can wear around town, but I brought it to show you. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by
Second.
trustee Bowman, second by trustee Garner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.